The great Stoics said that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and in fact, we suffer more than necessary by suffering before it is necessary. Welcome back to this series about not complaining and actually enjoying your very short life whilst you're living it. Now, I really couldn't talk about the concept of not complaining without mentioning the Stoics. So far in my framework for dealing with complaints, we've covered the problems you want to actually have in your life and how to notice them and stop complaining about them and be grateful for those problems. We've also covered the problems you don't want to have in your life, how to diagnose those things and actually go about fixing them before they cause major problems. And finally, we need to cover the problems in your life that you want to accept. Now, rather than writing about my own ideas from scratch here, I may as well lean on the original gangsters on the art of not complaining, the Stoics, those friendly ancient Greeks and ancient Romans who knew a few very important things about enjoying your life. Briefly, the Stoics' main philosophy was that we can't control or rely on any external events. We can only control ourselves and our responses. That means that we should focus on self-control and fortitude to overcome destructive emotions that make us do silly things and make our life worse. Stoicism is all about acceptance of the present moment, embracing the importance of clear thinking, having unbiased judgment, inner peace and general freedom from suffering, and of course, not complaining. I have personally read the entire series of the great Stoic philosophers. Despite them being very great, they are maybe a little bit dry. So to save you the bother, I'm going to break down the 5 most important concepts for you in this episode. So let's crack into it. Kicking off with the first concept, the dichotomy of control. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This is perhaps the most foundational concept in Stoic philosophy. It's just a straightforward but very profound idea. The world is divided into things that we can control and things that we can't control. And this notion was most famously put forward by Epictetus, who was a slave who became ultimately a prominent philosopher. He argued that understanding and acting on this principle is the key to just maintaining tranquility and achieving a good life. At the heart of the dichotomy of control is the belief that our actions, our beliefs, our desires are actually within our control completely, but things like external events and actions of others are beyond our control and we shouldn't let that phase our emotions. The principle really teaches us to focus our energy and attention on what we can influence and accept with equanimity the things we cannot change. And by doing that, we reduce feelings of unnecessary stress, anxiety, and frustration, and build a general state of inner peace and contentment. Now, importantly, this is not like complete passivity or resignation from anything, but it just means proactive engagement with what is within your control and a measured acceptance of what is not. So, very important is to recognize that you do have agency, just to know where that agency is and how to use it properly. So ultimately, you'll do things like make peace with unpredictable, uncontrollable aspects of life and act upon the things you can change with resilience. Let's say you receive some harsh criticism from a colleague. Instead of stewing over your colleague's harsh words, which you can't control, you can use the criticism as an opportunity to reflect on anything that there is possible that you can improve and just improve yourself. And don't really worry about others, even if they're always going to hate you or if there's something that will change. It doesn't matter. Just use it to become your best self. Being stuck in traffic might make you feel anxious or frustrated, but with the dichotomy of control, you know that you can't control the traffic. It's just going to be there and nothing's going to change how fast you get to where you're going. So you may as well just take a deep breath, listen to an audiobook, call someone if you need to, but sit there and accept the moment of the things that you aren't going to be able to change. A Stoic would not argue with his GPS because he knows that he cannot change the route, but only his destination. And now for the second concept, Amor Fait, basically translates as love of fate. And this is another powerful concept. It's the Stoics, they're all powerful concepts. I don't know why I need to say that. Anyway, love of fate is all about acceptance and embracing of everything that happens in life, but not merely just tolerating it, but actively loving it. Because he who laughs at himself will never run out of things to laugh at. Now, this might seem counterintuitive or daunting in certain situations, But the Stoics argue that with radical acceptance, we can really find peace and liberation. Instead of trying to deny pain or difficulty in life's challenges, we can embrace the challenges, and that's really part of building a growth mindset after all. And they believe that embracing challenges is really part of the human existence. It can teach us to stop wishing for things to be different, i.e. complaining, and stop fearing what might come, and instead just embrace life in all its chaos, all its beauty. So when things are going like super badly wrong, we can just be like amused at the weirdness of the situation, except that it's only going to be around for a while, and just be really curious about it as opposed to like panicking and trying to stop it straight away. This way we build a lot more gratitude for our life and all the events within it, good or bad, and just see them as opportunities for growth and learning. Let's say your relationship turns bad and fails and you're feeling crap about it. With the concept of Amor Fati, instead of becoming bitter or regretful or resentful, you should practice viewing the end of a relationship as a chance for personal growth, allowing you to learn about life and experiences and become a stronger, happier person, and be grateful for everything that happened and be grateful that it's already over. You can go one further. Love of fate could also be applied to jobs. Let's say you lose your job unexpectedly or your business goes under. Instead of dwelling on the unfairness of your situation, you can embrace the love of fate and see this as an opportunity to explore new career paths or spend time learning new skills, and remembering that sometimes it's the hardest moments that actually build people and push them into a new area of life. And I've certainly seen so many people have like midlife crises, and it's actually been the thing that pushed them into doing something they actually wanted to do with their life. And sometimes it's the chaos that actually builds the greatness, and accepting that sometimes bad things make good things happen is just such a really nice situation that just makes you feel more excited the whole time you're going through life. For example, several months ago, I was in Portugal and I was meant to be going home to London to see my mum for her birthday. And then at like 2 a.m, my flight was cancelled and it was just chaos. And I stayed up for like 2 hours trying to sort out this flight so I could get back. And I may have been drinking. So eventually I had to get up like super early the next morning with a hangover to take a train to like a different city in Portugal to get the only plane I could get. And it was a difficult situation to the point where I was like, oh my God, Mum, why do you have to have awkward birthdays? Even though it was my own fault. And then in the queue to that plane, I met a Portuguese lady who is now my girlfriend. Because of the terrible situation, I now have a girlfriend, basically. Sometimes bad things cause the good things, even completely unrelated. If you just sit around thinking this is a bad situation, you might miss the chances that are there for a good thing. And you can't really make a positive day out of a bad day without having an optimistic mindset. So embracing love of fate and just rolling the dice every time and just being like happy with what's going on, definitely a good way to live. It seemed to work out for me quite well, so hopefully it can work for you too. Now on to number 3, negative visualization. We often suffer more in imagination than in reality. And negative visualization is all about premeditating on things that worry us. The reason you might do this is to actually like embrace and accept them and realize that maybe they aren't as worrying as you thought. Like I had a guest on not so long ago, would talk about the things he wanted to do, but then he'd just write out all the things that might go wrong and then sign a contract with himself being like, I'm going to do it anyway. So even if something does go wrong whilst he's doing it, it's like, hey, I already thought that this might happen. It's not that bad. I'll just carry on anyway. Because usually most things aren't as bad as we think they're going to be. And by going through negative visualization, we can think about like potential losses and worst case scenarios. And we can also like take the edge off some of them. It might sound very pessimistic, but the objective is not to actually like dwell on bad things, but to diminish shock and potential panic that you would have at these things happening when they do happen sometimes. And it will really help you be a lot more rational. I think it also really helps you contemplate the temporary nature of basically everything in life. And instead of taking them for granted, make more of the things whilst they happen, in terms of like last time visualizations of everyone you know might die at some point, and it might be the last conversation you have with them. And so you can come across a bit nicer. Possibly the most famous Stoic that spoke about this was Seneca, who said that you should set aside a certain number of days during which you should be content with the scantiest and cheapest of fare, with coarse, rough dress, and saying to yourself the whole while, is this condition the thing I really feared? Ultimately, having some bad clothes and nothing nice to eat isn't that bad for like a week. And if your business goes under or you lose your job and you have to go and live with your parents, etc., you'll be all right. And now on to concept number 4. Virtue is the sole good. Now, In Stoicism, the importance of virtue is a cornerstone belief of being a Stoic. Moral and ethical virtue is part of the highest form of goodness. It's the only thing truly worthy of pursuit. Now, as long as humans have existed, we've always wanted external things, wealth, reputation, power, physical pleasure. But Stoicism is really an important reminder that actually none of those things matter apart from just being a good person. And if you can take happiness in that, you don't necessarily need all this external crap. Wisdom, courage, justice, your temperament are all inherently beneficial things to have, regardless of your circumstances. So having a growth mindset towards your personal characteristics like that is much more important than trying to just achieve power and wealth, etc. And importantly, if you lack a good virtue and a good character, then no amount of wealth or success will ever actually truly lead you to happiness. So the most important thing is to focus on your inner character and self-reliance and resilience and integrity over external circumstances and things. Now, you shouldn't be doing this for external reward, but instead the actual act of being a virtuous person is the reward and the value in itself. And the Stoics would say that you should remember that very little is needed to make you happy in life, hence doing the negative visualization where you can live with scantiest of fare. And they'd also say that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having fewer wants, because the less things you actually want externally, the easier it is to be happy. One of the famous Stoics, Cato, was a politician in the Roman Senate, and he was offered many bribes and often faced political pressure to do immoral things. Instead, he always focused on upholding his honesty and integrity and chose to live a very modest life despite the wealth he could have, because he didn't really care about material possessions. In the same way, you might be offered a promotion. If that offer of money comes with having to cheat and lie about things and do things that aren't of good character, as a Stoic, you should say no to that money and be happy with your life as it is by being a good person rather than wanting the extra money. Or maybe you're playing a sports match, and let's say it was tennis, and this is an important sports match to you, and maybe the umpire makes a mistake and gives you a point in your favor, but you know it's not true. As a Stoic, the importance of playing fairly and truthfully is more important than winning, because you would not deserve to win if you were not playing fairly. So you should tell the umpire that he's made a mistake and give the point back. And now, if you're not a good character, you would not do that, but it's a helpful reminder to know of. And here's a joke for you. Why did the Stoic refuse to play the lottery? Well, he knew that the only jackpot that he could control was the wealth of his own character. Great. I'll not tell any more terrible jokes this episode. We're almost there. The last concept is mindful acceptance, so maybe you can accept that I've made a terrible joke and carry on listening, and that would be lovely. Anyway, mindful acceptance. Now, that might sound similar to the Amor Fati and Love of Fate, but there is a subtle difference. Amor Fati, Love of Fate, is about embracing everything that happens, good or bad, with actual love for what fate brings, whereas mindful acceptance is about non-judgmentally acknowledging what is going on without necessarily loving it or looking to have opinions either way, and just being able to see reality as it is. Now, they sound a bit like they're maybe conflicting concepts, but it's more just about having a third person view of your situation and being a rational human being that isn't prone to anger and things. So when you focus on awareness and acceptance of a present moment without judgment, you can be fully engaged in the here and now and accepting what is happening without fighting or changing it. And this really helps you let go of the desire to control external. This really helps you let go of the desire to control external circumstances whilst focusing on your internal response, which is great to reduce anxiety and stress. Marcus Aurelius was another one of the very famous Stoics who, as the emperor of Rome, faced numerous challenges. He had to deal with attacks from North Germany, rebellions in northern Italy and Egypt. He had an outbreak of the plague. Now, during these crazy goings on, he wrote his book Meditations, which became one of probably the most famous Stoic books that's been written. And it really helped him build a character that just made him one of the most loved emperors of Rome of his time, and to be able to transcend all of the difficulties with a very pragmatic approach. Another important Stoic was Epictetus. He was born a slave to Epictetus, which sounds like a harder word to say than Epictetus because it is. He ended up actually administrating things in the court of Nero before eventually gaining his own freedom and becoming a lecturer in philosophy. He was then later forced to leave Rome when philosophy was banned from the Italian peninsula, and despite many challenges over his life, including having a crippling limp, he continued to teach the importance of Stoicism and acceptance, and truly believed that no person is free who is not the master of himself. Another story that I really like is about Edison, who was not a Stoic, but he was a prolific inventor. Despite being the first person to record sound and music, invent the light bulb, and really innovating in the whole world of electricity, he wasn't always the best with money. However, he did manage to build a very large factory within which he had loads of different projects going on, trying to push his different innovative ideas and bring them to reality. Now, one evening, a fire started in the factory, and it quickly spread across the entire building until the whole thing was ablaze. And Edison, right, stands outside with his son, and he turns to him and says, "Run and get your mother. This might be the biggest fire she'll ever see in her life." Now, Edison could have run around being super stressed and just having a shit time, or he could sit there and see what was going on. He's obviously not going to be able to stop this fire, so he may as well enjoy it and invite his family to come enjoy it with him. So that's what he did. And that's a perfect example of Stoicism. I think that nicely rounds off the episode. That was a very fast overview of most of what you should know about Stoicism. And if you do want to hear more about it, well, as I said, I did read the entire series of the Great Stoics, and I actually did a summary of each book on my other podcast, Wiser Than Yesterday. So if you like book summaries or Stoics, then you can go there. Otherwise, I would also recommend Ryan Holiday. Anything that he does as an author or podcaster is great. It's all based on Stoicism. And also Mark Manson, he's the guy that wrote Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. You might not realize it, but basically everything he writes about is Stoicism, but just with more swear words and it sounds a bit more modern. But it's very readable. On that, a final quote: "Don't go on discussing what a good person should be, just be one." So, let's finish the episode, and thanks so much for listening. As always, life is to be enjoyed, and that starts with enjoying today. So, be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.